Welcome back. Before I get into this video, I would like to point out the collab cameo I did with Sir Sig last week, which is why I haven't posted a video for that week. You can find the link in the description below. In today's video, we get to watch Riley Dennis whine about her representations.
Recently, it was announced that Lando Calrissian from the newest Star Wars movie Solo is sexually fluid and pansexual.
I'd be willing to bet money on some people wanting to whine about that, but I sort of like the idea of Lando Calrissian, Space Casanova, swinging for both teams. It fits my headcanon pretty well. So why are you complaining now, Riley?
At first glance, you might think that this is a win for queer representation. A character who isn't straight in a major Hollywood film, and one owned by Disney nonetheless. And that would be super cool if he was actually shown in any way to be queer in the movie itself. The problem is, nobody watching Solo is going to know that Lando is queer. And so, can you really call it representation? I don't think so. Representation doesn't count if most people watching the movies aren't going to see the representation.
Oh boy. So is this going to be you whining because we don't see more guy-on-guy boning in films?
The reason we strive for better queer representation in movies and TV shows is because it normalizes being gay, or bi, or trans, or any other identity.
Riley, as a bisexual person, I acknowledge being quote-unquote queer isn't normal. I mean, take the word you use. Queer. It literally means strange and odd. If you want people to acknowledge being queer as normal, stop using the word queer. You are literally telling people you're strange. And in reality, it isn't normal. In the US, as of 2017, on average, only 3.8% of the population is part of the LGBT community. We're not just a minority. We're a really tiny minority. The vast majority of the population are heterosexual. Heterosexuality is the norm. We don't need homosexuality to be normalized. We just need it to be accepted, and you're not helping.
And it gives queer people someone to look up to. Someone for them to say, wow, I could be like that.
Does your entire identity revolve around who you make love to? You can look up to anyone, not just to the people who like to screw the same type of people you do.
But when you have characters in your movies who you say are queer but who never show it on screen, that doesn't normalize anything. If anything, it furthers the heteronormative and cisnormative idea that anything that's not straight or cisgender has to be hidden out of sight. And you don't give queer people anyone to look up to, because the only future you're allowing them to see is one where they can't be accurately represented on screen because they have to hide their sexual orientation or gender.
Or, movies tell a story, and people are not defined by their sexual orientation or gender. People are defined by their personalities and actions. It's not that the movie is hiding their sexual orientation or gender by not blatantly trotting out a character's gay husband and adopt daughter to go, hey, this character's really gay.
This is wonderful. You know, I've never been here. Oh, no? What I hear is that the bars here are excellent.
So glad you guys could come.
It might be that they have better things to do with their runtime of the film by advancing the actual plot.
So why does this happen if it's not even representation for the queer community? Well, I'd argue it's so that filmmakers can incentivize queer audiences to see their movie while not alienating more conservative audiences.
In all honesty, I am willing to bet you're right. Some characters are made gay purely to make people like you who sit there and demand more representation happy. This video, this one right here, leads to the exact phenomena you are whining about, Riley, and the only reason you don't see it is because your sexuality and gender are so important to your identity, I worry if you have any other aspect to your personality.
Because the online queer community is packed full of people starving for representation who are willing to rally behind films with queer characters. That's a potentially very enthusiastic audience that filmmakers are going to want to reach.
Like you? People like you sitting on camera complaining there isn't enough representation? They'd add more token queer characters just to make people like you happy? I'm shocked! Shocked, I say!
I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on in here. You're winning, sir. Oh, thank you very much.
But at the same time, lots of folks in the US and the world in general still aren't comfortable with the existence of queer people. So if you were to have a character be obviously queer on screen, it could potentially deter a very large conservative audience, which would be bad for business. So having the film itself lack any queerness while stating behind the scenes that a character is queer gives them the best of both worlds. They get that energetic online community and hopefully don't scare off too many conservatives.
Yes, they can try, and as evidenced by videos like this, fail to shut up people who whine about representation. What next? Do we whine about how few atheists are in movies? How everything in the US follows a Christian normative narrative? Do we need to have at least one character in every movie declare their atheism? Because in all honesty, non-religious peoples make up around 22.8% of the population. That's 6 times the number of LGBT peoples. People who are strictly atheist are around 3.1%, about on par with the LGBT community. Do we see atheist representation? No. Do we demand it? Hell no! Because whether one is an atheist or a theist doesn't play into who you are or anything to do with most stories in a given film. If the film has to do with religion, atheism might come up. If the film has to do with relationships or sexuality, their sexuality might come up. The reason you don't see your ideal representation is it's not relevant to the damned plot.
You lose! Good day, sir!
But I think
I said good day!
Now, Riley goes on trying to read into people's motives for not putting in queer characters she likes and basically demonizing the movie and film industry, so I'll skip ahead to this part.
And of course, this kind of queerbaiting is nothing new. After all the Harry Potter books had come out, J.K. Rowling said that Dumbledore was gay. In 7 books, she'd never managed to even mention that slightly, but oh yeah, he was for sure gay. And then, in the newer Fantastic Beasts movies, they had a chance to make Dumbledore's sexual orientation more prominent. I mean, the movies are literally about Dumbledore fighting Grindelwald, the guy he had a crush on / maybe dated, but the director of these movies, David Yates, has said they won't explicitly address Dumbledore's sexual orientation. Like, how is that even possible?
Now, I'll preface this by saying I haven't read the books, I just watched the movies, so I know I am missing some of the nuance, so there's no need to point out in the comments that the movies are not identical to the books. I get it. But in the movies, at least we rarely see the adults engaged in anything romantic. I mean, the best we get is Hagrid and Maxime's budding romance in Goblet of Fire. Aside from that, the teachers and adults are there to move the plot forward for the kids. The only other romance between adults really mentioned with any real substance is Snape's infatuation with Harry's mother. The focus of the films is the kids, so it's no wonder the headmaster of the school, whose job it is in the plot is to push the story forward and guide and mentor the children who seem to solve the magical world's problems, doesn't take some extra time out to sneak his boyfriend into the castle for Harry so we can have an awkward, "Oh, so you met Reginald" moment. In the context of the series, any such attempt would make it feel contrived.
It's a pretty integral part of the story. They're really gonna have to twist the plot in all sorts of ways to avoid talking about his gayness. That will just make it convoluted and nonsensical. Not to mention that it's a slap in the face to queer people. J.K. Rowling said this character was gay, but she didn't have a chance to say so in the books. So they make movies about his backstory, and surprise, still no evidence that he's gay. That's just unbelievable. Along with a bunch of things these movies are doing wrong, it's just massively disappointing that a series that pretends to champion diversity and inclusion can't just let us have one on-screen gay character.
Maybe a story about a rogue wizard threatening the magical world, being chased down by someone who may or may not have dated him once, doesn't need to go in depth on the fact that they may have dated once or maybe flirted a couple times, and focus on the fact the villain is threatening everyone's way of life. I mean, you're whining because they don't show Dumbledore, a secondary character in this film, making flirty eyes at a guy he's trying to hunt down and capture. And keep in mind, this is in a film that hasn't even come out yet and you're whining about the representation. This is the level of petty we're getting into?
And this has happened with plenty of other movies too. There were characters in Beauty and the Beast, How to Train Your Dragon, Star Trek, Power Rangers, and Thor Ragnarok that were all said to be queer off-screen, but none of them were actually noticeably queer on-screen.
In Beauty and the Beast, LeFou was clearly seen dancing off with his supposed love interest at a ball. And while this was a short clip, it was on-screen representation, as you put it, though one could contend the entire Gaston song did that already. In How to Train Your Dragon, Gobber comes out with a short offhand remark.
This is why I never married. This and one other reason.
As for Star Trek, I showed that scene already.
Hey, so glad you
I mean, it's fairly blatant. And the Power Rangers...
I'm the new girl. Always. 3 schools in 3 years. It was crazy. I like it that way, you know? It's just easier. Nobody ever has to get to know me, and my parents don't have to worry about my relationships.
Boyfriend troubles.
Yeah. Boyfriend troubles.
Girlfriend troubles?
My family is so normal. Too normal. They believe in labels. They'd like for me to dress differently, talk more, have the kind of friends they want me to have. I don't know how to tell them what's really going on with me. And I've never said any of this out loud.
Well, it's cool. You're with us now.
But I'm sure that heartfelt outpouring was nothing. As for Thor Ragnarok, the character Valkyrie is seemingly bisexual in the comics. In the comics, she's kissed Dr. Annabelle Riggs, and intimated she isn't the first woman or man she's kissed. The actress in Thor Ragnarok even filmed a scene with a female lover leaving her bedroom, but the scene got cut, possibly for time. But sure, a campfire scene with the Yellow Ranger pouring out her heart and soul is so not any form of representation. Of all these, the Star Trek and Power Rangers ones are the most blatant, and you include them with the short little clips like Gaston and Gobber like it's nothing, which makes me think you, Riley, are just a whiner who cannot be pleased unless you see 2 gay people screwing on screen. Anything less than stopping the plot to watch 2 gay guys making out just isn't enough, is it?
It's safe to say that this is a tired and overused trope at this point. I wish movies would just give it a rest. Either own up to the fact that you don't have any queer characters in your movie, or stop being a coward and just throw some queers in there. I mean, I'm just spitballing here, but you could even have 2 queer characters in one movie. I know, mind-boggling.
Let's look. Let's count them together. 1, 2. Mind-blowing, isn't it, Riley? One of your own examples meets your own damned criteria, and you're still not happy. I mean, we have a lot of examples of, say, lesbian and bisexual women on screen as couples, like Basic Instinct. Femme Fatale. And Black Swan, just to name 3. We also got several examples of gay men, like in Total Eclipse. Alexander. And really, who could forget Brokeback Mountain? I mean, every single one of these involves 2 quote-unquote queer people. Or does the second one here not count? Who's the one trying to hide queer characters now, Riley?
But we do tend to travel in groups, so it would make sense. Have a bi character, have a gay character, have people just living their lives and loving who they love and being who they are. There's nothing wrong with that.
Except the movies you're whining about are often action movies. People aren't living their lives and being who they are in action movies. They're fighting things. What you want is a romantic comedy. And don't get me wrong, I love rom-coms. My favorite to date is a toss-up between 27 Dresses and Princess Diaries. Don't judge me.
No, you don't judge me, 'cause if you did, baby, I judge you too.
We may slowly be accepting queer people more and more as society progresses, but it seems like we still haven't really gotten to the point where our society can recognize that queer relationships and identities are okay for children to see, and we have to work to get there. There will be pushback from homophobes and transphobes if we put queer people in movies, but that's just how it's gonna be.
Riley, your main issue seems to be that we put queer people into movies, but you're unhappy with the quality of them, because they aren't engaging in behavior that makes their queer status readily apparent. Worse, when it is readily apparent, you claim it isn't. So if anything, it's you who's suppressing queer people here. For decades, homosexual and bisexual men and women have been in movies and on screen. A lot of the examples I gave were from the 2000 to 2010 era, not even the most recent stuff. Please, just give it a rest. The tokenism you see with queer representation in recent years is literally a reaction to people like you whining for more representation. They add in characters like this to shut you up, and they shoehorn them in inorganically purely to try and satisfy whiny snowflakes like yourself. If you want better representation in films, lay off of the online autistic screeching.
Victory screech!
And maybe contribute to the film industry by writing scripts or books they can turn into films. If you're upset with the quality of your representations, fix it. Don't expect everyone else to. As for me, I'm gonna go watch Tremors 6. By the way, I'm wondering, do some parts of that count as queer representation?
That explains the ABs.
Ass blasters.
All right, listen up. If there are ass blasters on station, graboids aren't far behind. Graboids?
Anyways, that's it for me. If you enjoyed this video, remember to mash that like and subscribe button. If you enjoy this content or have requests for future videos, leave a comment or send me a message. If you want to be kept up to date on when I post videos, feel free to follow me on Facebook and Twitter. And as always, I will see you next time.